The waitress, the man in the tailored coat, exploded, chair scraping back. She left everything to the waitress. The lawyer didn't blink. Papers slid across the polished table. Her final codicil names Nora Vega as executor and trustee. The bulk goes to the Hartman Community Trust. Over my dead body, he snarled, grabbing for the pages. A hand shot out. The old man from the bank pressed the papers down. Two security guards shifted. The air in the conference room went thin. The lawyer nodded toward the glass door. A line of faces stared in. Reporters, family, employees, everyone waiting for a fight. "Sit, Daniel," the lawyer said, "or they'll watch you put your hands on your mother's will." His jaw worked. He sat, but his eyes cut toward the woman in a thrift store coat at the end of the table. She kept her hands in her lap. She didn't look up. She was shaking. "She's a waitress," he said. "She met my mother 3 days ago." The lawyer folded his hands. "And your mother knew exactly what she was doing." The shaking woman finally raised her eyes. Nora swallowed. She didn't say a word. On the carpet, a melted snow print darkened where someone's boots had leaked through. Outside, horns blared. Inside, the pen in Daniel's fist snapped. He leaned forward, low voice. "You want to play hero, Nora. You have no idea who you're dealing with." She held his stare. Then she reached into her pocket and set a small envelope on the table. The lawyer knew it. His fingers trembled around the edges. Daniel's smile went mean. "What is that?" The lawyer slid the envelope toward the center. "Ruth's letter. Read it aloud." Daniel didn't touch it. The lawyer cleared his throat. "It starts with a snowfall." He unfolded the paper and the room dropped away. Just 12 hours earlier, wind hammered the diner windows so hard the neon buzz flickered. Chairs were flipped. The grill hissed quiet. The owner had gone home. The last bus didn't run in a whiteout. Nora wiped the same spot on the counter for the third time, watching the snow stack higher than the hood of her rusted Civic. The town was small enough that she knew who wouldn't make it home tonight. She knew who would still try. A shape hunched past the glass, thin, doubled coat flapping open. Not walking, trudging. Her hand was moving before her head caught up. The deadbolt clunked, cold knifed in. "Ma'am," Nora shouted over the wind. "You can't be out in this." No answer. Just a shuffle, then a collapse onto the mat, snow clinging to a gray braid. Nora dragged her in and kicked the door shut with her heel. Hey, you with me?" The woman blinked, skin the color of paper, lips blue at the corners. A heavy ring spun on one finger, too big for her hand but too loose to matter. Her coat stank of mothballs and perfume. "Sit," Nora said, hauling her to a stool. "Tea, food, heat." "No tea," the woman croaked. "Just sit, please." The plea wasn't for tea. It's for safety. Nora shoved a space heater closer, threw a blanket over bony shoulders, snapped on the kettle anyway. Her fingers worked as if feeding someone in a storm was muscle memory. It was. She didn't ask questions until the woman could swallow the broth and hold the mug. Only then. "What's your name?" "Ruth," voice steadier, eyes sharp now. They weren't the eyes of a confused wanderer. "Got family?" Nora asked. Ruth's hand tightened on the mug. She didn't look up. "Don't call my son." Nora paused. She had already slid a phone closer to the napkin holder, thumb hovering over 911. She moved it back. "Okay," she said. "No son." Ruth exhaled, something like relief and panic tangled together. She pulled at her coat pocket, slow like it hurt. A small envelope came free. She stared at it, then she pushed it toward Nora. "If I don't wake up in your place tomorrow," Ruth said, every syllable carved from something heavy, "you open this." Nora's eyes flicked to the door where the storm flayed the glass. "You're waking up." Ruth gave a quick shake of her head. "Promise." Nora slid the envelope under the register. "Promise." The door howled. The clock over the counter clicked past midnight. The town disappeared under a sheet of white. Ruth's hands wouldn't stop trembling. Nora made a nest in the booth by the kitchen, wrapped her in 2 more blankets, tucked heat packs under her feet. She called nobody. She texted her landlord that she was keeping someone safe. She turned the heater to high and brewed more tea. She sat on the other side of the booth in her coat with her boots on. At 3 in the morning, Ruth woke choking on a cough that didn't stop. At 4, her fever broke. At 5, her eyes focused. At 6, she fell into a real sleep. At 7, the diner's owner texted, "Closed today." No roads cleared. At 8, Nora slid a tray with toast closer and tapped Ruth's shoulder. "You have to eat." Ruth looked at the toast like it might cry. Then she took a bite. "You have kind hands," she said after a while. "You're freezing," Nora said. "Let's get you to the clinic." "No clinic. You're asking a lot." "I know." Ruth's mouth trembled. "Please." Nora looked at her keys, then at the storm, then at a woman who had crossed the street and almost died rather than be taken home. "Okay," Nora said. "You can rest at my place. It's 5 blocks. We'll go slow." Ruth nodded. Her eyes shimmered. "Thank you." They slipped out into white noise. Nora moved step to step, blocking wind with her body, checking every few yards that Ruth was vertical. A city plow growled by and splashed slush. A driver honked and pointed at his head like she was insane. Nora flipped her hood up and kept going. In the apartment, she cleared the drafty couch and pulled extra socks from a drawer. She turned on the shower and steamed the bathroom until it was a sauna. Ruth stood there like the heat was a miracle. "Don't lock the door," Nora said. "If you slip," Ruth nodded. Her hands steadied on the towel. "Don't call my son," she whispered again to the tile. Nora didn't ask why. She just set a pot of soup on the stove and texted her friend Jessa that she might need backup if the fever came back. By noon, the snow stopped. By 1, the town found its footing. By 2, someone pressed a palm against Nora's front door 3 times. Not a knock, a statement. Ruth froze on the couch. Spoon in her hand hovered. Her eyes went blank like she was standing in a different doorway in a different year. Her breath shortened. "Don't open that door," she whispered. Her fingers dug into the blanket. "That's my son." More knocking, harder than a voice. "Ms. Vega, Nora," the name punched through the wood. Calm, polite, trained. Nora stepped closer to the peephole. A man in a dark coat stood on the stoop, scarf expensive, hair perfectly still in the cold. Behind him, a black SUV idled. 2 men stood by it, hands tucked into sleeves. The whole scene didn't belong on her street. "Ms. Vega," the man called, voice smooth now. "I'm Daniel Hartman. I think my mother is inside." Ruth's spoon clattered to the rug. "Please," she whispered. "Don't," Nora swallowed. "He says he's your son." Ruth shook her head, a tiny movement. Fear had wiped the color from her face again. "She's an adult," Nora said to the wood, because the wood had ears pressed against it. "If she doesn't want to see you, I can't force her." Silence. "Then I'm not here to fight," Daniel said. "She's vulnerable. There's a guardianship order. She doesn't know what she's doing." Guardianship, lawyers, money. That explained the coat and the SUV and the men with the empty eyes. Nora didn't move. "We can talk through the door." He breathed out like a man negotiating a contract. "Tell her this. If she comes with me now, no police. If she refuses, I'll come back with them." Ruth made a sound that didn't belong in a living room. "He will put me away," she whispered. "He will lock the door and throw away the key." "Is any of that true?" Nora called. "A beat." "I'm protecting her," Daniel said. "She wanders, she signs things, people take advantage." Ruth shook her head. "He wants the papers, he wants the shares, he wants me quiet." "Shares," Nora repeated. She had exactly $76 in her checking account. Shares meant a different world. But the woman on her couch wasn't a set of numbers. Nora pressed her forehead to the door. "I'm calling someone, not police, a lawyer for her." "I have lawyers," Daniel said. "She doesn't want yours." Silence again, then a step back. "You have an hour," he said. "Then I come back." The SUV pulled away, tires crunching the new snow like bones. Ruth was still curled small on the couch. Nora knelt. "Who do you want me to call?" Ruth closed her eyes. "The name is on the envelope," she said. "Under your counter from the diner." Nora went to her bag. The envelope was heavy from the steam in her pocket and the storm. Inside, a crisp card and a note in a measured hand. "Call Arthur Bloom. Do not tell Daniel." Nora's stomach flipped. The number connected on the second ring. "Bloom," a voice answered. "This is Nora Vega. Ruth told me to call." Silence, then a chair scraping. "Is she with you?" "She is." "Good. Keep the door locked. I'll be there in 20 minutes. You can drive in this." "I'll make it." He did. Another black car, but older, with a dented bumper and snow packed in the wheel wells. A man with gray hair and an overcoat that had seen too many winters climbed out. He carried a battered briefcase. "Ms. Vega," firm handshake, warm eyes. "Arthur Bloom. I've been Ruth's attorney for 26 years. Nora opened the door. Ruth sat up straighter, relief breaking across her face. "Arthur," she whispered. "You came." He took her hands and squeezed. "Are you all right?" "I am now." His gaze slid to the living room window like he could see through curtains. "Daniel gave us an hour," Nora said. Bloom sat on the edge of the coffee table. He took out papers. "Ruth, you said if you could just make it one night without Daniel's team, you'd sign. I hope you meant it." Ruth nodded. "I meant it." He turned to Nora. "Witness?" Nora blinked. "Me. You saw that she's lucid. You saw her refuse contact. You're independent. That matters." The paperwork moved fast. Guardianship revocation. Emergency petition. A new medical directive. Then a thick envelope sealed in red wax. "The update to the trust," Bloom said, tapping the wax. "The officer at the courthouse will stamp this at 4 today if we can keep Daniel occupied until then." "What about his hour?" Nora asked. Bloom checked his watch. "Then we keep him outside for 45 minutes. Knocking, right on time. Louder." "Nora," Daniel called, voice harder now. "This is ridiculous. Open the door." Bloom didn't move. "Go on," he murmured. "Buy time." Nora opened the door 1 inch, chain latched. We have a lawyer. Daniel's eyes flicked to the chain. Of course you do. You can come in when Ruth says yes. Ruth doesn't understand what's happening. A cough from the couch. Ruth hears you just fine, the old woman said. Ruth understands perfectly well you like the sound of your own orders. Daniel's mouth twitched. Mom, please. Bloom stepped into view. Daniel's expression changed like someone cut a wire. Arthur. Daniel, you're enabling a confused woman and a stranger. I'm stopping a son from steamrolling his mother. Wind shoved against the building. Curtains moved. Nora saw it then, not the coat or the car or the suit, the fear under all of it. It didn't belong to Ruth. Daniel glanced past them as if counting exits. You can't keep doing this. There are shareholders, boards, press. You made those rooms, Ruth said evenly. You shut the doors. His jaw set. Enough, get your coat. No, get your coat. Arthur, finish, Ruth said. Bloom clicked a pen. His hands didn't shake. The 45 minutes crawled. Nora stood in the doorway and took every insult Daniel could calibrate. Gold digger, naive, opportunist, savior complex. She took them like they were snow on a coat. She kept her voice even. She watched him watch her not flinch. At minute 46, Bloom slid the last paper back into the envelope. Done. At minute 47, sirens wailed 2 streets over. Not headed here. Just the town doing its job. At minute 48, Daniel lost the thread. You think this ends today, he said. You work in a diner. I pull one phone call and you won't work anywhere. I do that before lunch. Ruth stood, slowly. She moved like someone who had waited a long time for the exact words to answer. She reached into her pocket and brought out a small velvet pouch. It had been tucked into the folds of her coat all this time. She set it on the windowsill between them. Daniel stared. What is that? The thing you've been chasing since you learned how to sign your name with too many zeros, she said softly. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to, he knew. We're done, Ruth said. Go home. He didn't. He stalked off the porch and into the SUV. The tires spit slush across the street. Bloom snapped the wax closed on the envelope. We go to the courthouse now. Nora grabbed her coat. Ruth held the back of the couch like she might drop. Nora pressed a hand to her elbow. Can you make it? Ruth nodded. Yes, they made it. They filed. A judge signed. The stamp hit paper with a thunk. That night, Ruth sat in Nora's kitchen and ate soup and told one story, the kind you tell when your mouth is finally free. She told how she had married young and run a hardware store with a man who built houses and never charged widows. She told how they had worked 50 years for a company they named after their street. She told how people liked to say empire, when what it really was a town. She told how one day her husband died and there was a board and a son and a press release, and she was retired with a smile. She told how she liked to walk, how she forgot to bring her coat sometimes on purpose, how she wanted to see who would stop when an old woman stood at a corner looking lost. What they offered, what they took, who they called. She kept a list. Names of people who saw her and didn't ask for anything in return. On the paper in the other room, a single name had been written in a stiff hand 2 days ago. Nora Vega. You tested me, Nora asked, somewhere between offended and honored. I looked for you, Ruth said simply. I didn't know your name. I just knew there had to be someone left who would open a door on the coldest night of the year without asking who I was. Nora stared at the pot on the stove because the pot did not expect anything of her. I just did what anyone would do. Ruth smiled. That is never true. They didn't sleep much. Nobody did. 2 mornings later, the cough came back and took Ruth to the hospital with a speed that left a dent. Bloom met them at the ER. He stood in the hallway while Daniel raged at nurses. He stood in the doorway when Ruth took his hand and told him to do it. He stood by the window when Ruth signed the codicil to the trust with a hand that shook but didn't waver. She looked at Nora last. This isn't a gift, she said. It's a job. Don't let him sell the town to people who don't live here. Nora nodded. Okay. Ruth squeezed once. Then she slept. She didn't wake up. Back in the conference room, the lawyer's voice was steady as he read. To Ms. Nora Vega, who took me in on a night when I counted days, not dollars, I appoint you executor of the Hartman Community Trust, the controlling partner in Hartman Development. You will hold the shares in trust. You will not sell. You will not fold. You will not be afraid. You can't do this, Daniel said, paper white, shaking. She was delirious. The bank officer spoke for the first time. The judge certified her capacity on Tuesday. She didn't understand. Daniel, the lawyer, cut in quietly. Listen. He read Ruth's last paragraph. It was short. It cut clean. If my son has the wealth he says he does not need this. If he has the heart I raised him to have, he will come back when he learns how to apologize. Silence. A reporter's camera clicked against glass in the hallway. Someone swore. Someone laughed once and stopped fast. Daniel stood. You think I'm going to let a waitress run my company? It isn't your company, Bloom said. It's your mother S. It always was. He pressed a document across the table. A stock power. Signed, witnessed, sealed. Daniel stared. It didn't matter. He knew paper with that weight meant something had shifted under his feet. You want war, he said. Fine. She doesn't have the stomach. She has rent and bills and car repairs. She'll fold. Nora still hadn't spoken. She lifted the small velvet pouch and handed it to the lawyer. He opened it carefully like it might break. Inside was a key, not to a house, to a safe deposit box. Attached to it a note. Nora had seen Ruth write it out with slow care in the kitchen while the soup cooled and the storm pressed against the windows. Arthur, the lawyer read aloud, voice going hoarse. Give this to Nora after reading. Inside, the documents you showed me 22 years ago, the ones we did not use, the ones in case my son made me choose between him and the town. I hope he never does. Daniel's face cracked. It wasn't anger anymore. It was something rawer, something closer to a boy missing the father who used to carry him on his shoulders. Bloom wrapped the key back up. We're done here, Daniel swayed. We're not done with anything. He slapped a hand on the table and leaned into Nora's space. You think you won. Do you know what happens now? Phones, cameras, headlines, people digging into your life, your mistakes, your mother, your rent, your past due bills. You aren't built for this. Nora's stomach knotted. Her rent was late. Her car needed brakes. Her mother's number was blocked for a reason. He wasn't wrong about any of that. She picked up the envelope again, the one that had sat under the diner register like a grenade with a heart inside. She slid it across the table to him. Read it, she said, not because you deserve it, because she did. He didn't touch it. He couldn't. The lawyer unfolded it again and began. Daniel, he read, you were born on a Tuesday. You didn't cry. You watched. You always watched. You learned early that the loudest man gets his way. You learned I was not loud. You learned how to speak for me. It made you powerful. It made me small. I did that to both of us. I am sorry. If you are reading this, I am gone or gone enough that lawyers have to speak for me. In that case, I want you to hear my voice without anyone else in the room. I want you to know I loved you when you built things with your hands, and I worried when you started building only with paper. I want you to meet the young woman who opened her door to me without asking for my last name. She reminded me who I was before the boards and the press and the men in suits. She has the one thing we both forgot. She isn't afraid to lose. The paper ended there. Ruth's hands had been too tired to write more. Daniel stared at the tear into the white where the writing ended. He pressed 2 fingers to his eyes. He didn't cry. He stood. Enjoy your headlines, he said, voice flat. Let me know when you need a loan. He walked out into the flashing lights and microphones. He put on a smile like a helmet. He gave the camera a line about honoring his mother's legacy. He played the game he'd always played. Inside, the lawyer slid the safe deposit key across the table. Now the hard part, he said. Nora took the key. It was heavier than it looked. The bank vault was a quiet place where noise didn't reach. Nora signed forms with a hand that shook. A woman in a suit opened box 317. Inside lay 2 folders, a USB drive and a photograph. The photograph was of a young woman with flour on her hands standing in front of a hardware store with a sign that said Hartman and Sons in paint that hadn't dried. Nora picked up the folders. Property deeds, board minutes, old letters. The USB drive held videos. Ruth from a year ago, Ruth from a month ago, Ruth 2 days ago. In the last video, she looked into the camera like it was a person and said, if you got this far, you did the thing I asked. You made it to the stamp. Now do the rest. You are going to carry it until you find 3 people who scare you because of how much they care. Give it to them, then you can stop. 3 people, not just one. A waitress wasn't a savior, just the first hand on the wheel. Nora left the vault with the box locked again. Snow was melting into black rivers along the curb. The town had already started talking. By sundown, there were comments and headlines and old photos and new accusations. By morning, rocks hit her window. Thief. A voice shouted from the yard. Gold digger. She moved the lamp so it wouldn't shatter. She didn't open the door. The next knock was different, soft, 2 taps. She peered through the peephole. It was Daniel. It was a man with a tool belt and a shy smile. He started building houses with Ruth's husband 60 years ago. He had been at the funeral. He had kept the book of who got help when the winter checks went out. He was 68 and stooped and angry. Can I come in? He asked when she opened the door 2 inches. Before I throw a rock to show you I'm on their side, she stepped back. He set a folder on the table. We got a letter, he said. Ruth wrote it to us. Said if you came with a key, we should stop yelling and start helping. You need a board you can trust. You need someone who can count past money. You need someone who doesn't care what Daniel says. That's me. Behind him, Jessa slipped in with a grocery bag and a hug she didn't ask for permission to give. She whispered, "Your face is everywhere," like that was good news or bad news she couldn't tell. The door knocked again. Arthur Bloom. He had brought 3 names, a nurse, a math teacher, a retired union rep, nobody with a TV show, everybody with a stake in the street. They sat around Nora's table and argued about how to spend $1 like it was their last. They called the power company. They called the food bank. They called the paper and said the story wasn't a fight over a will. It was a fight over whether a town stays a town. At some point, Nora realized she had put on Ruth's cardigan without thinking. It smelled like lavender and dust. She stood up to stretch and caught sight of herself in the window. She looked tired. She looked scared. She looked like someone who still had soup on the stove. Her phone buzzed across the table. Unknown number, she answered. "Hello." Silence. "Then you've got cameras outside," Daniel's voice said. "You want a quiet place. No deals." "Not a deal," a sigh, something like a crack in a stone. "I'm at the park, no cameras, 10 minutes. She shouldn't have gone. She went. He sat on a bench under a maple too early to have leaves. He looked smaller without buildings behind him. For once, he didn't start with the weather or money or threats. He started with a photo. Ruth, younger than she had a right to be, hair in a scarf, laughing with a man who held a 2x4 on his shoulder like a crown. "I don't know how to do this without her," he said, not looking at Nora. "I'm not good at things that don't have numbers." "Don't sell the town," Nora said. He laughed short. "You sound like her." "Good." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "I can fight you and lose and burn everything down, or I can figure out what she meant by apologize. That word doesn't get me much." "It gets you a seat at the table and a hammer," Nora said. "You can build, or you can sink." He looked at her then, eyes raw. "If I come into your meeting and say I'm sorry, you'll let me stay." "You do it one time," she said. "You mean it, and you stop throwing rocks at my window." He blinked. He almost smiled. "I never threw rocks. You threw headlines." He nodded once. "Saturday, town hall, noon." She stood. "Bring your apology and your checkbook." He huffed a laugh. "You're getting good at this." "I have 3 people to find who scare me with how much they care," she said. "You might be one of them if you stop being a coward." He watched her walk away. He didn't call her back. Saturday, the hall was packed. People who had known Ruth for 50 years and people who had only read headlines. People who threw rocks and people who picked them up off the snow. Nora stood at the front, hands steady on the podium. She wasn't here to be loved. She was here to hold a door. Daniel came late. He didn't come in a suit. He came in a sweater that made him look like he had a mother once. He walked to the front without looking left or right. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't speak like a press release. "I'm sorry," he said. "I made a lot of noise because I was scared. I did things I can't make pretty. I can do one thing right now. I can stop selling things I didn't build. I can help fix roofs and billboards and promises." Silence, then clapping, then more. Arthur Bloom slid a microphone closer to Nora. "Your turn." She took a breath. "We're not splitting a pot of money," she said. "We're setting rules. Nobody gets a check without a plan. We start with heat. We start with houses. We start with the school roof that leaks onto the math room on days the wind blows east. 3 people run this with me. Names on the wall, faces on the doors. We do this slow and we do it loud enough that if anyone tries to shut it down, the whole town hears." Ruth's cardigan hung heavy on her shoulders. It wasn't a crown. It was a job. Afterward, people pressed her hands. Some said thank you. Some asked for things, some offered. At the back, a young man in a hoodie hovered. He had the look of someone used to being turned away. "My mom cleans houses," he said when he finally stepped close. "She reads the paper to practice English. She says you're brave. She says Ruth was too. She gave me this." He held out a folded list. "Names of people who helped her when she moved here. She says you should put them on your board." Nora unfolded the paper. The last line was written in a shaky hand. Someone had added it that morning. "Find 3 people who scare you with how much they care." She looked up. The room was loud and messy and full of people who didn't agree on lunch, much less leverage. It was perfect. Outside, snow still clung in dirty piles. Kids kicked at them until they broke apart. Across the street, Daniel stood with his hands in his pockets, watching a window glint in the sun. He didn't wave. He didn't leave. He just stood there like a man trying to watch how things get built when the blueprints live in people instead of binders. Nora tucked the list into her pocket. She had rent to negotiate, calls to return, a meeting with the power company at 8. She had a town to carry until more hands held it. On the lawyer's desk, Ruth's letter sat folded. In the envelope was a note Nora hadn't seen yet. Bloom would give it to her after the week hit hard. When he did, it said only this: "You did not shelter an old woman. You opened a door you didn't know was your own. Keep it open."